for today to your people. And I grappled with it of the context of, I grappled because I'm saying, what do you want? And I'm standing here and I am definitely sure that he's saying, do it in the context of faith. Do it in the context of faith. And God set the parameter for that to be done in the context of faith. So we want to lift the reality of trauma that happens to all of us. We want to deal with it, but we want to have as a foundation the context of faith. Now, I'm not going to speak on faith. I'm still going to speak on trauma, but I know that God has filled you this morning. That's the point. I know the words came to raise your faith level. I know that you understand that all things work together for your good, even in the midst of trauma. Thank you, worshipers. I know. So in the context of faith, we struggle because we're saying, why should we have trauma when we have faith? But God is saying, in the context in which you live in the context of humanity with the Spirit of God inside of you, igniting life within you, not just for now, but for eternity. But the life is not just salvation. Salvation is a package. Salvation is a package. Salvation is your wholeness. Salvation is your strength, your energy, purpose is in salvation. So we always think about it only in terms of escaping hell, of shunning the devil, or having control over the devil and the circumstances of the devils which come through wicked people. But God said it's a whole package. Because I know, God knows, that we live in this world in our humanity, even though we have the Spirit of God, as we read in Romans, inside of us. And God knows that we're prone to the challenges that the world throws at us and that are in the world. We can't escape them. They're there. Once you're in a family, you will have trauma, challenges. Once you are in the world, you will have suffering. Once you are in a relationship, you will be impacted. And I always say this, I'm putting a plug here for marriage. And this is something I learned after 43 years of being married. Listen, we need to be able to understand that both people come from different experiences. Both people come from different types of homes, types of cultural upbringings. And if they're not Barbadian, then that's a whole new level. And, you know, the truth is, we get married with a Disney World view. You know, the prince, the lonely princess, rescues us, and we live, and we live. And when the trauma comes, when the challenges come, we don't know how to respond because the church doesn't talk about trauma. You're not supposed, in the context of faith, we want to say everything just goes, success. But in the context, even of the life of the Israelites, there was trauma. From Egypt to the Red Sea, crossing the Red Sea, going through the wilderness, trying to take Cana. Trauma everywhere. But the church grapples with the concept of trauma in faith, in the context of faith, as if they are separate. It's not separate. They're the same reality. They come together, they combine. Because as we read earlier, God said, Paul was talking about his sufferings. And Paul was one of the greatest apostles. And then we see Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's talking to his Father about the suffering that he has to endure. So there should not be there's no contradiction. There should not be any confusion. It's just that God releases a revelation in a certain time and age, and people go with that. But it doesn't mean that trauma never existed, even in those days. It's just that there was not enough revelation given to deal with it. So God has sped us up so that we walk into a reality of trauma and faith. Faith and trauma. Challenge and faith. Suffering and faith. Failure and faith. Because that's where God is. He meets us there. That's why he died. That's why we have salvation. And then we look at salvation, as I said before, as a whole package. So we are challenged to take salvation out of just the package of sin and go to heaven. And when I die, it's for life. It's for now. It's a whole package. So God wants to bring us to a level of faith. I want to say a revelation, not level, of faith that deals with the whole package that we are. The whole package of our lives. The whole package of our being. The whole package of our existence. Faith is relevant. Christ is relevant. Because the things we were not taught before made Christ irrelevant to life. Or seemingly. We couldn't see the whole package. But God is saying Christ is relevant to all of our lives. And you might think, oh, I knew that already. No, this is a new revelation. Trauma that is being released in the earth. And God is saying, if we understand this, and I'm telling you, I'm speaking by the Holy Spirit right now, nothing on my notes. If we understand this, then we are able to handle life at a different level. So when we go into marriage and we see that different personality, by the way, counsel is important, long term, we are able then to understand and assert our faith actively so that we are able to overcome, to deal with, to lessen, to manage, to the impact of the trauma or the challenges that will come. Whether that's a marriage, relationship, work with the boss, work with your siblings. You know, we have all kinds of sibling arguments going on. And some of those arguments go on for like 25 years, 30 years. Even house and land. That's trauma. And some people would prefer, listen, some people would prefer to die and not sign those papers so that nobody gets anything. I do not understand it. Some people would prefer their mother's legacy, and this is trauma. Because I deal with people in coaching where they have parents or siblings or family members who will not put the name on that paper so that that land can be divided. That's some of the trauma. So our trauma is not just colonialism. Sometimes the trauma is caused by us, the way we deal with life. Maybe hold on. Some people prefer their parents' legacy to rotten to the ground rather than sign that paper. Now, by the way, they have 10 houses already, 3 apartments, 4 cars, 2 limousines. I'm just exaggerating, but you understand what I mean. They have a lot. Even if you only have 1 house and your mother left 3 houses, you want all 3. And instead of signing the paper, so you get 1 more, and a sister get 1 more, and a brother get, or a cousin get, they may deserve it, they may get nothing. And you prefer to leave your mother's hard work, your father's hard work, your grandfather's hard work. I do not understand it. I also want to give you a little story in that context. That's trauma. Say with me, trauma. It is trauma. Because that means I have a case where people are now 70 and 75 and can't get that land because that sibling, that uncle will not sign those papers and everybody's already old, ready to die. Come on, are you with me? Am I talking truth? Am I speaking something that's relevant? This is trauma. So we look at trauma as colonialism. We look at trauma as in marriages. We look at trauma in relationships. But this is trauma. This is cultural trauma. This is how we deal with life in Barbados. I prefer that business, that building, to stay there and have no one in it than to lower my rent. So we create our own trauma. And by the way, trauma is cyclic. It cycles. That's why you could have a family person, member, hating you or not speaking for 25 years, 30 years. It's cycling. So you prefer that building to stay there and rotten and occupy nobody before you lower the rent. I know the mother is turning in her grave and that grandfather is turning in his grave. You even given the dead trauma. I'm serious. Lower the rent. The only life, the only thing that where a building has life is when it's occupied by people. So you have just entered into death. When you leave that building to rotten, it will rotten just all by itself. You'll pass by there and you will see that the building has just fallen. Because the only thing that gives life to building and to spaces is people. That's why your people are your greatest asset. We could be here and no one is here and there's no life, really. You know, it's interesting. I was going to say something and then I'll say something else. You know, in terms of that building and business and family stuff, let me just give you a little something. And we had a situation many years ago with my mother's house, and I must confess that I didn't see the full picture. But one of my sisters sold the house for peanuts to the other sister. I was livid. I really was livid. And then God showed me, you have to keep looking. I said, no, you can have it. You don't have a house. I don't want it. I am selling it to her for peanuts. I tell peanuts, I mean peanuts. And she gave it to her daughter who had 5 children. I went to live in the States. Listen to me. I saw a legacy. I've never spoken to my sisters about it. I didn't want it. She didn't want it. Said, okay, my niece has 5 children. She will take care of it. Obviously, there's a mandate of how to keep it and so on and so on and so on. She's done a very good job, by the way, over the years. I go rent an apartment. You understand the heart. Listen, I didn't see the full picture until years later. Now they're all grown, but I've seen the picture years later. That happened a second time with my uncle's house. And the same person, I want to say she's blessed. My sister, my last is blessed. She said, I don't want it. He left it for her and a brother, a cousin. The one that used to terrorize us with the cutlass. Yeah, that one. And he tried to fight. And she said, listen to me. I heard her, oh, I got to give you another one. I will not fight with you. But as long as my brother, which is my brother, our brother, is living in this house, you can't put him out. So she said, I don't want it, but you have to live with my brother in this house, free of cost. That happened a second time. And I just went to, God is blessing her, you know. I really began to see that God was giving me a prototype. Like, we just buried our other uncle who she took care of. And the land is there. She get more land. She just get more land. She gets to get a house. Just so. I asked her how things are going. She said, good. I said, what are you going to do? I'm waiting to hear. Because I know if there's a cousin in the mix or somebody that needs it, they'll get it. It is, but listen, God give, that's a prototype. I want to say that to Barbados, man. I'm not saying give away your property stupidly. I'm not saying give your property to people who are working, they pass down behind them and they're doing, I'm not talking that. I'm saying this is a prototype. Because what happens, you create trauma. It becomes a cycle. You're fighting. Can you imagine you're fighting for 30 years for a piece of land? 25 years? People dead and gone and the land just there, and your mother worked so hard. Your mother is traumatized in her grave. Your father is traumatized. Your uncle, your grandfather traumatized in their grave. If you are a Christian by faith, ask God what to do. But don't let your mother and father, listen, I will never let anything I have just die because I don't want anybody else to have it. Because it's something God has put within us, my family, that part of the family. And I saw it after a lot of years, and I said to myself recently, do you know how much trauma we escaped? Do you know how much infighting we escaped? And everybody came that could come to that funeral, the last one. And the other thing we do, and I'm going to tell you because there's a prototype for me. Everybody says, what are you going to give towards the funeral? And everybody says, yes, I'm going to give this towards the funeral. And everybody gives towards the funeral. And the person gets buried. That is what have been practiced among my mother's children for years. I remember my cousin died, and she got money from everybody. I didn't know. I said, well, how comes I know? So I got to give you money. So I give her daughter money on behalf of the mother, for the mother, and she could spend it, do what she feels like. Because I understand, because I deal with it. You have 25 years of trauma fighting over that piece of land, 30 years of trauma fighting. So I want to put it in the context. Trauma and faith. So if you're a Christian, you've got 2 pieces of land, 3 cars, 4 boats. The Spirit of God is within you, and you're fighting for one more piece of land. Or you're not a Christian. I'm sorry, I have to put this out here. Because we talk about the colonialist trauma, governmental trauma, relationship trauma, but sometimes we create our own trauma. And that's a big trauma in Barbados. A family not speaking. It's okay if they're not speaking to you. And I tell my daughters that. I say, honey, I'm not interested in who's not speaking to me. I'm going to do the right thing. I call them on the anniversary. I call them for Valentine's. I say, would you like to go to lunch? No. No. I call them again another time. Do you know what happened? This last funeral, everybody came together. Amen. And now, who ain't speaking is speaking. Trauma and faith. How are you going to use your faith? Are you going to be a perpetuator of trauma? Or you're going to be a person that deals, releases trauma from your space and from the atmosphere? Because space is important. We occupy space. Even like husband and wives, brothers and sisters, siblings, arguing and fighting and violent. That house you live in is full of trauma. I ain't buying the groceries. I buy groceries. Who can't eat my groceries? So we want to blame governments and we want to blame bosses. But sometimes we take to work that trauma. I bought it and put it in the fridge. Don't eat it. Don't touch it. This is mine. This is mine. So we have a culture in Barbados that creates trauma in our spaces every single day. We are traumatized people. And yes, all of that comes from colonialism. But it's time to put a stop to that colonial trauma. Because people who were abused people. People who were made to suffer want to make other people suffer. People who were deprived of the niceties of life want to deprive other people of the niceties of life. So I want to make you aware that when God says salvation and we have faith, it is not faith in the context only of sin. It is faith in the context of our realities. And we are moving away from thinking only faith, salvation in the context of sin. We are mixing. Isn't that what God said? You didn't mix it with faith. We are mixing our lives with faith. We are mixing what happens to us with faith. We are making it relevant today. So what does trauma do? We're holding faith. That trauma is present. It destabilizes our entire life. And I just give you some examples. It throws our emotional health out of balance. And it traumatizes our souls. So our souls get a lot of that. See all that family feuding? That's traumatizing of your soul. That traumatizes your soul. It acclimatizes us to a new normal and a lesser version of ourselves. And sometimes we don't even realize it. We walk with our head bent. We don't even realize our eyes downcast. Sometimes we're not even sure if to go into public, if this body would accept us, how to approach somebody because of something that has happened. So that's what trauma does. It tries to give us, isolate us, and cause us grief. And I looked at the word grief. And grief, we always associate with just mourning and death. But grief is more than that. When I heard the word grief, what I heard in my spirit is something you feel. You feel it. It creates, it impacts you. It impacts your soul. It impacts your mind. It impacts your emotion. You feel it. And you can describe it, you know. You can describe it. So grief has to do with sadness. I know you didn't think about sadness as grief. But if that person is putting you down all the time and you're sad constantly, or even if you're not constantly sad, that's grief. Grief is sadness. Chronic grief, maybe sorrow would be trauma. You're chronically sad. It's trauma. Then suffering is also grief, but it's also trauma. Suffering. Desolation. Feeling deserted, feeling all alone, feeling left out. It's trauma. It's grief, but it's also trauma. Pain is grief. You feel it in your body. You can feel it. It speaks to you. You feel the pain. You feel the ache. You say, oh God, I got an ache here, got an ache there. That's grief. Heartbreak is grief. I know we think about grief as more than our heartbreak. But heartbreak, yes, is his grief. Somebody broke your heart. That is a friend, a BFF, or a boyfriend, or husband. And then mournfulness is grief. Mournful. So you don't just mourn when somebody died and you go to a funeral. You can carry that mournfulness through the day. That stays inside of you. And you're aware of it. You're smiling, but you are aware that you are in a mournful state. That's grief. So the truth is, what we experience daily, and that's only a few, is trauma grief. That's what we experience. Or grief trauma. Because there are probably about 50 definitions for grief. And trauma, all related. So every day, we carry about in our bodies some level of trauma. Isn't that true? So what God is challenging us to do, and I'm plugging this right here, is to keep remembering that we have to be in two states. You could be in trauma, but you're in faith. So you have to use your faith to deal with trauma. And don't let trauma be the only state you are in. So you have to come out and reach back or reach forward and remember, yes, trauma is happening, but I'm a person of faith, and faith is within me. How do I mix my faith to deal with my trauma? So grief. Now, I looked a little bit then just to give you some other stuff at the stages of what I call trauma grief. Do you have that? It should be on the... Did you get that? Trauma grief, I can't see. That's what happened. Stages of trauma. Yes. Now, these are only a few, and these are a few from one source, and there are many other sources that have different definitions. So, trauma grief or grief trauma, so that you are able to know it and identify it when it happens in you, is loss. But it's also hurt. That's okay. It's also shock. Actually, shock is the first stage of trauma. Somebody runs upon you, you don't expect it. As my husband said, what are the three things? You flight, you fright, or you freeze. Shock is always the first impact. So trauma impacts you, and the first impact is always shock. Then you get numbness. So after that shock, your brain is saying, what should I do, what should I do, what should I do, what should I do? I don't know what to do. So you go numb. I didn't expect this. I didn't know this would happen. How did this happen? Numbness. And then you go through what we call denial of emotions. Denial of emotions. I'm sure everybody can identify that. That didn't happen. That didn't happen to me. And you go through it. Anger begins to develop. And it's turned inward first and then outward. So once you're not dealing with your trauma, you're not mixing your faith to deal with trauma, and you're just letting trauma be cyclic. And I also want to add another one. You're allowing trauma to be a straight line with no interruptions, because you're not mixing your faith against it. Then anger is one of the other expressions. Internally first, and then. You know, in Barbados, we have a thing, we say we are seething. I don't know if anybody uses that word anymore. You know what seething means? S-W-T-H-I-N-G. It means you're so mad, but you're not going to say it. You're going to hold it inside. You're holding it. You're holding it, and you're seething. And we think that's good, but that's impacting your soul. That's impacting your emotions. But you're holding it. You're holding it. So it's impacting your space, your internal space. And then after you don't have a proper way of dealing with it, it goes outward. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Then we have fear. First thing. One of the other responses to trauma is fear. And that's why the Bible says, for God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of love and a Sound mind. Power. Power what? Over the trauma. Power, love, to soothe that, to deal with it. And a sound mind. You're not going to be mentally tormented. Or in other words, don't allow yourself to be mentally tormented. But that is if you understand the cycle. Is this cycling through my family? Is it cycling in my life? What am I doing? Or is it flat line and pretending it's not there? Then you give it dominance. But if you look at the word, God has not given me a spirit of fear. You begin to activate that over the trauma, but of love and a sound mind. I always wonder why God put power, love, and a sound mind. Power is to do with the spirit of fear, but love is in relationship. Think about it. Then the next one is panic. So you begin to panic. You go to level 2 now. Here's something I found quite interesting. Shopping for pain or searching for safety. This is what happens inside. There's nothing outside. And we go through that. Cycle it. I go through that. You could go through that for 5 years, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years. And you're shopping. So what's happening when you're shopping, I'll tell you in a bit. While you're shopping for pain or you're searching for safety, is your brain doesn't turn off. That switch, that ignition is constantly there. It's there. You're not talking about it, but it's there. So your brain just trying to figure this out and figure this out and figure this out. But you're not dealing with it. It's right. It's still there. Your brain is constantly on. I remember I had a couple of businesses, about 3 businesses as an entrepreneur. And I was doing that. I was doing the church. I was coaching. That's the grace God gave me. I was dealing with the ministry of social care. I was dealing with poverty alleviation. I was teaching young mothers. I was teaching back to work, preparing persons who are not as privileged to go to access work. So I used to do motivation. I used to come in and help them understand the life of work and so on like that. I was doing a lot of that. I was training mentors, and still I had the ministry. We had about 40 ministries. I was doing that too. And I was leading and managing and appointing leadership and training. I used to have training sessions Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then we were doing worship and so on and so on and so on and so on. And it was great. 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 And God knew that I couldn't continue. So when what happened, I sat down and waited on God for his meaning, to give me meaning out of it. And eventually, I got the meaning. He wanted me to pause. Because subsequent to that, I'd been to the doctor. And he said, your brain is not turning off. I said, my brain don't turn off. Because you don't think about that. He said, your brain is not turning off. I said, he said, your brain is always going. And I couldn't understand what he meant. But in those days, I was heavy into intercession. And I'm saying this for Christians and pastors who feel they have to keep going and don't allow God to prune away some stuff. I was leading intercession, doing intercession 3 days a week, 2 days a week. Intercession, big. Doing deliverance. And all of that mixed with stores, establishing stores 1, establishing store 2, establishing store 3, coaching, counseling. I was doing that. God said, I went to a health specialist, your brain is not turning off. I said, why? Because in those days, I used to get about 12 on prayer to 5:30. Constantly. That was not, by the way, that was my lifestyle. 12, 5:30. When the others are going to prayer at the office for 6, I was now going to sleep. 12 to 5:30, that was my mandate. And he said, you need, so you know I was going to sleep late. I was hardly getting sleep. He said, you need to sleep. So if you don't rest, your body is going to keep the score. Now, even though I was doing really, really good things, my body was traumatized. I was traumatized. Because in between that, you got the relationships, and you got the issues, and you got the different issues. He said, you got to sleep. And I really, really, I want to say, although I understood it and I tried, I didn't take it as serious. I really want to say thank God. And I know it's painful for some people, for COVID. My whole body reset. My whole lifestyle reset deliberately. Everything got reset. And from COVID till now, you know what God said to me? Keep the structure. So I prepare for bed. I prepare for sleep. Sleep is not haphazard. I don't fall into my bed and go to sleep tired. He taught me that. I prepare my space for sleep. I prepare my space, whether it's worship, whether it is beautiful stuff, clean. My space has now taken on a new dimension of my reality. So I prepare for sleep. So when COVID lifted, you're back to the same old. And God said, keep the structure. No matter what I'm doing, no matter how busy you are, you keep that structure because it's going to impact your body, it's going to impact your mind, it's going to impact your soul. So what is the next thing I do in preparing? Worship, sermons, praise, reading, time alone, space out, lying down, crossed, I just do it. But it's different. So much so that even when my grands come, I say, okay, this is grandmom's time now. You go to granddad, you go to auntie, you go to mommy. This is my space time. And they understand that. And they go out and say, okay, grandmom is resting. I will come back, but this is my time. This is my space. And a lot of us don't understand that. How trauma impacts your space. How trauma impacts your body. And I want to just say, the Holy Spirit just said, no, how trauma dictates to you what kind of space you have. I know people who just come home and fall into bed in the work clothes. In bed, brush your teeth, comb their hair, say hello, tired. Yes, sometimes I do that, especially if it's a prophetic moment. Prophets get hit hard. But when it comes to nighttime sleep, I prepare. I keep the structure. I keep the structure. So you have to be mindful of your space and the trauma that you allow, because trauma could dictate your space. Now, what's the next one? Disorientation. So I want to say there's some things you have to cut off, some things you have to let go of, some things you have to pause, some things you have to give up, some things you have to downgrade, some things you have to walk away from, some things that are taken away from you, and sometimes you just have to say thank you. That was good. That was God. Not in the beginning. It is when you sit down and you listen and you hear, God, what is in this purpose? What is the purpose in this? And then you say, thank you. But I want to say the other one you want to go with is disorientation. Then level 4, depression. So if you're not dealing with it, it's a cycle. And then it's a flat line. It's not being broken up. So depression sets in. And depression. Depression looks like this to some people. You don't clean your room. You don't wash your clothes. I'm on the simple level. You don't eat. You don't feel like eating. Your mother, your father, your husband, why you don't clean your room? You're depressed. That's a symptom. So people feel depression is just walking around with a long face. The trauma impacts and dictates your space. Remember I said that? And what happens in it. So if you're depressed, the trauma is dictating what you do in your space. You don't wash your clothes. Clothes smell funny. You don't bathe properly. Don't groom your hair. You want to eat fast food. Some people eat fast food and don't understand they're depressed. They have a lot of trauma. They said that's all they could do. I ain't going to go home and cook. Sometimes, I'm not saying you have to cook all the time, because that's another story for me. But I eat healthy, though. My husband is a great cook. Amen. So listen. Sometimes people don't want to eat. They eat fast food all the time, and they're wondering, yes, it's taste. Yes, it is all of that. And it's how you train your body, but also it's trauma. They want to go home and cook because they want to go in that space. They want to see that body. Am I wrong or am I right? I don't want to deal with them. I want that when they go home, all they do is go to bed. So trauma dictates what you do in your space. Now, according to a science journal, the brain changes with trauma. So it's not like I'm experiencing trauma and you know, as Barbadians, we like to think we are tough, we are strong, and we can hold it, and we can stay the course, and all the time your brain is being impacted with trauma. So the science journal, and I have the source there, that's only one, says the brain changes with trauma. I remember when my daughter got ill, and we couldn't figure out what was going on and blah, blah, blah. And I remember I really felt, I'm adding faith with trauma, and I felt, Lord, I really felt, I didn't know the depth of it and the magnitude of it. So, you know, you believe that it's going to be quick. But obviously, God is allowing it for other reasons. There's a purpose. There's a purpose. So I remember I was going at it hard, like my personality is. I'm going to stay with it 12 till 12 o'clock. I am not giving up till I feel that aha moment. And I remember sitting on the sofa. We lived somewhere else, and I sit on the sofa, and I felt, you want to hear this? My brain shifted. I felt it. My brain shifted. I could feel the impact. And God said, now you know to stop. Now you need to pull back. Now you need to take care of yourself. And then I got on a journey of doing exactly that. But I felt it. I felt it shift. I said, my goodness. Now I didn't do this research. I do it now. And now I realize that the trauma, consistent, continuous trauma, affects your brain. It affects the brain cells. Extreme trauma, stress, that is trauma, can shrink some of your brain cells. It overwhelms and kills some brain cells, which is the cortisol, which is the stress hormone. When you get trauma, it becomes overloaded. It becomes flooded. The cortisol, it becomes flooded. And imagine you are flooding for 25 years. You're flooding for 30 years. You're flooding over every situation, over the house, over the land, over the friendship, over the husband, you're constantly flooded. And you're not dealing with it because you're a strong woman or a strong man. And that's why I tell people I'm not a strong woman. I'm an interdependent person. I'm not carrying a load. And I want us women, there's a plug, to push that demonic concept from off our lives, especially black women. Because we get into relationships and we are the strong woman. And we're holding everything and doing everything and paying the bills and doing the light and sweeping and cooking and we feel that is what a woman is supposed to do. Slavery. And we think, and we're under stress constantly, and then we begin to age. Now come on, man, I want you to understand this is what happens. Pay for your wife or maid. I mean, let the wife be the person, as in Proverbs 31, to deal with the maids, because maids have reputations. Don't deal with the maid as a man. The woman deals with the maid, the woman orders the maid, the woman tells the maid must respect the woman. As long as the maid is in the house, and she's not respecting the maid, the woman, the wife, the maid has to go. So the woman is the voice. And I'm saying that because this is years of experience. So what was I saying? What was I saying? Right. Trauma impacts you with all that house cleaning. That came from slavery, though. That you feel you had to cook, clean, wash, and then the system begins to magnify that and make you think that's your role. You have purpose. I always say to women, stop eating so much fast food, I'm going to call the name, accumulate the money, and get a maid 1 day a week. And you will see how much less trauma you have. Come on, men. Do it for your women. Do it for your wives. Because then what you want, which we know is what you want, number one, more of, better, you will get. Come on, be with me here. You can't get it from a tired woman. You can't get it from a traumatized woman. You can't get it from a stressed out woman. I'm sorry, I'm plugging it in here right here. All of that is trauma. I'm talking about space. I'm talking about faith. I'm talking about trauma. I'm talking about the impact. I'm talking about it. Trauma and faith. So we have to understand these are realities. So trauma is not just somebody putting you down, shutting you down, letting you down. It's not just the boss. It's your space. And it's what you do and what you allow. It's the violence. It's the abuse. It's the outcome. Yes, a lot of women feel I can handle abuse. He beat me 3 times. He beat me 4 times. She beat me 3 times. She beat me 4 times. And it's okay. No, it's impacting your body. And trauma passes down generationally too. So we need to understand that. And it's a cycle. It creates a cycle. So I'm saying, understand that trauma it affects your brain. It shrinks your cells. And it keeps your brain always shopping for answers. So your brain never turns off. Why is this? What is this? When is this? How is this? It keeps your brain. So you got to mix faith. You got to get in the Word and mix faith and pull it out against that trauma, against that situation. And sometimes you just have to sit and say, what's the purpose in this? How is this going to, what is the purpose? What's the benefit? How do you want me to deal with this? How is it, how do you want me to respond? Because faith gives you answers. Faith, I'm sorry, Christ in me gives me answers. If it is a fight, flight, freeze, run, but it gives me answers. Could be pause. Do it differently. Let it go. Circumvent it. So the trauma, therefore, impacts us, and it's real. People, it's real. The cortisol stress floods the brain, impacts the I can't remember the word. Hypothalamus, and cause some cells to shrink. So when that happens, we turn inward. And it causes us to get lost in questioning. Now, this is a long sermon, so I'm going to have to cut it short. Our brain goes into questioning. I call it overdrive. It goes into questioning overdrive. Questioning overdrive. Why? What? How could God? How did this happen? How? Go back to faith. For all things work together according to. There's suffering in Christianity, but God works it through. So I could go back to God for answers, because faith has answers. Faith has ways of escape. Nothing shall take you but what was it? But such as is common to man. But I will give you, to go back to faith. So trauma and faith. Not trauma overpowering you, trauma and faith. So that we keep getting into questions. What did I do to deserve this? Why is God allowing this? And then we keep holding anger internally, and it comes outward. Now, for some people, this outward displays itself differently. Performance. You overperform at work. You're working till 11, till 12, till Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and a day in between Monday, Sunday, and Monday. All the hours, as soon as they say yes. Did you yes? Yes. But it also impacts you internally and, turns outward in terms of not just performance, but sex. Sex, yes, that's a big one. Big, big, big. Big one. Sex, drinking, physical altercations. Isn't that true? Isn't it big? Physical altercations. I wanted to make that really nice because I didn't want to use the common word violence or abuse. Physical, abusive behavior. But this sex one is a big thing. Because studies was shown, and I don't know if I want to say this, that a certain profession, when they go into certain countries to do certain work, after that work has been finished, and they do the analysis, sex, prostitution has gone up by, 50, 60, 70%, 80, 90%. You know why? Because men don't understand that after you've given out and given out and given out, you need to rest. It's stress. You're in a stress zone in giving out all the time. And when you do those things, conferences, you travel, everything inside of you is now low. And the worst mistake you can make, and that's the enemy gets you. Because everything inside of you is low. And you're open and vulnerable. Bam. And the sex drive goes up. And therefore men the sex drive goes up, sex statistics goes up, prostitution goes up after wonderful, glorious times. And I will say no more on that. Sex is one. Suddenly your partner is not good enough. Suddenly you're drinking yourself drunk. You're always underneath the what do you call it? The little rum shops in a little dark corner, or you're smoking. It's stress. It's trauma. You're trying to figure out life. You're questioning. Your brain is not shutting off. How am I going to feed my children? This is the only amount of money I have. How am I going to do this? How is this going to happen? You've got to mix it with faith. Once you're in Christ, and if you're not, come to Christ and mix it with faith. Because faith gives you answers. Faith gives you solutions. Faith gives you purpose. Faith gives you a pause and a way out. The other thing, if the questioning, we are moving on, we question God's continuous acceptance of us or his presence. We question if God still loves us, like David, because he has sinned. And when God showed me this, I want to pull this one up. When God showed me this with David, I was shocked. Because David sinned, and for years, I want to say the church glorified David as an adulterer. And even though he's saying God forgive him. No, David suffered. David had trauma. I don't have the scripture right now, but I can tell you when the prophet Nathan came to David and tricked David into responding, afterwards, Bathsheba had a baby, and David pleaded with God for the baby to live. And God said, no, because you deliberately sinned, because you disobeyed me, the baby's going to die. Isn't that trauma? Wasn't that trauma? And then the other part of that says, and your house. Did I write it out? Because you have despised me by taking and murdering Uriah by the sword of the Amorites. Because he pushed Bathsheba's husband up front, knowing he would be killed. Because you showed utter contempt for the word of the Lord, your child shall die, and the sword, listen to this, will never depart from your home, from your family, from your household. Read it. It's right there. Samuel 12, 12, 12. 2 Samuel 12. From this time on, your family will live by the sword, because you have despised me by taking and murdering Uriah by the sword of the Amorites. Because you showed utter contempt for the word of the Lord, your child will die. And the sword will never leave. You know what that is? There's generations of trauma. It means David is going to be battling, and didn't that happen? His son interfered with his concubines and his wives. His wife laughed at him, Saul's daughter. His wife raped his sister. He had an unusual fetish for the sister. We call that pedophilia, demonic. His son, right, had an unusual desire towards one of his sisters. And he was so beautiful. And he thought that his beauty would save him. And then when he died, David had more trauma. David mourned and mourned and mourned and mourned and mourned and mourned and mourned. And then the prophet Nathan had to come back to David and say, listen, he's gone. It's done. That son that did so much wickedness to you mourning for, well, if you don't get up, you see these men out here that are faithful to you, that in your army, they're going to leave you. So get up and dry your eyes. And David had to get up and dry his eyes and return to being a king. But David experienced trauma. So murders create cycles of trauma in families, generationally. So it's not cool to murder people. You're causing your mother trauma, your father trauma, your sister trauma, and it goes around in your siblings. It goes around through generations. Deliberately murdered a man to get his wife. Deliberately. And then the shame of it, he allowed the Ammonites to kill him. And he was a Jew. That was the thing God hated most. You allowed the Ammonites to stay on the wall and shoot their arrows, and you knew he would get killed. And you allowed the people we are fighting against to kill him. Trauma. So trauma became the new normal for David. Definitely became. I want to skip, and I want to go to 3 examples. Trauma endeavors to hold power over us. And it can try to dictate our beliefs. Let's look at Matthew 9, 20, 23, if you have that. This is the story of the lady with the issue of blood. I'm not going to spend too much time. We know this story. She was isolated. She was humiliated, right? She was rejected. And socially, she was an outcast because of the issue of blood she had for 12 years. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. That would not go away. 12 years. Imagine bleeding for 12 years. So socially, she couldn't go out because we know blood smells, right? So she couldn't go out because you're bleeding every day. But what it did to her, it held power over her and in her so that she remained in the house. She remained humiliated. She remained isolated. She remained feeling rejected. And she couldn't socialize, so she had no friends. She couldn't go to parties. She couldn't go and eat. She couldn't go and enjoy her space. All that is space. She couldn't enjoy it. She couldn't connect with people. So she didn't have encouragers, to be with and to have fun with. So this woman, Matthew 9:20-23, what does it say? It says, just then a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. What do we have there? Trauma and faith. Trauma and faith. Trauma and faith. So she allowed it, or it was allowed to hold power over her for a certain amount of time. 12 years is a long time, isn't it? But eventually, she mixed faith with her trauma. She mixed it, and faith overcame the trauma, and she reached out. And she took a chance and broke the power of that trauma by doing something totally different. And once you saw, I told you, faith gives you answers. So she saw the opportunity. Jesus in town, they say this about him. I am not missing that. I go in. I'll be there. And I'm not going to wait on permission. That's another thing. We think faith has to wait on permission. I'm not waiting on permission. I've been here for 12 years. I'm not waiting on permission to go out this house, to go and socialize, to get my healing. I'm going to get my healing. I'm not listening to my friends. They've already told me all they could. I'm going to get my healing. And she didn't wait on permission. And she went in the crowd, touched his hand, she was healed. Trauma and faith. Faith will heal trauma if you activate it. Faith will annihilate trauma if you activate it. Faith will lessen trauma once you activate it. Faith has the power to overcome trauma once you activate it. If you see it as this is trauma and that is faith, and the two, you don't use your faith to overcome the trauma, and you think, I shouldn't have any trauma, I shouldn't have any trauma, I shouldn't have that, but at church I have faith, and you don't understand your faith is your whole being, your whole life. So you have to use your faith to destabilize the trauma. Is that good? So we're going to run on because I want to give you a little bit more. Woman at the well. This is the one I love. I call her the rebounder. She had I call her rebounder syndrome. Do you have that the woman at the well? John 4:5-30. She was the woman at the well, no name. That's what trauma did to her, no name. The woman at the well. Again, she was isolated, humiliated, rejected, silenced, and she became nameless. She also became a social outcast. How do we know that? She came to the well in the heat of the sun, when nobody else goes to get water from the well. She came and she knew that everybody had already drawn their water, or probably they will come later, and she would be alone. She wouldn't have to see anybody, talk to anybody, explain to anybody what's going on in her life, talk about her trauma, feel ashamed, feel put down, feel left put down, shut down. She made sure that she was isolated because of her shame, of the trauma that was in her life. What was the trauma? Before I do that, she was seen as a tainted woman. And therefore she went into the heat of the day to avoid running into others. Surprised to meet a man, put a pin there. So she was seen as a tainted woman because of what was happening in her life. So she had all the trauma. She was humiliated. She was isolated. She was rejected. She was by herself. She had no crowd of friends. Socially rejected, socially put down. So because she was seen as a tainted woman, but what was her trauma? She was a perfect rebounder. She had 5 husbands. And the one she had was not her husband. So what I tell you, she was committing adultery. So she had 5 husbands. That's rebound. That's a rebound syndrome. And they say one of the biggest things in trauma when it comes to relationship is rebounding. So as we said, you got a failed marriage, and as soon as it stops, you find you're going to get another. All of a sudden you get into another marriage. That's rebounding. That's a rebounding syndrome, and that doesn't fail. Doesn't work. You get into another relationship, or another marriage, or another relationship, and another marriage, and you don't give yourself time to heal. You don't give yourself time to find out purpose in what is happening to you. Allow God to speak. Allow search for answers. You don't give yourself time to be whole again. So she didn't. So she ended up with 5 husbands. As soon as one died, she got another one. As soon as one died, she got another one. As soon as one died, she got another one. Because she was lonely and isolated. As soon as another one died, she got another one. 5 husbands. And then she got tired and decided, I'm going to get a man. And the husband she was with was not hers. So she was committing adultery. So she was seen as a tainted woman. So she had a lot of trauma, didn't she? Lots of trauma. This is real life. So Jesus had to meet her. And she was so surprised that Jesus, a Jew, would talk to her. She was shocked because all the Jews would not talk to her. And she was so surprised that he had a conversation. Out of that conversation, we know what happened. She was able to have power over her trauma. And she would either move out of that trauma. Well, maybe not right away, but a door was open that she could walk through. So that's what God provides. Faith has answers. God provided her with answers. He provided her with opportunity. He provided her with the conversations she was not having with anyone else. He met her where she was in her trauma, and he alone could have been the person to do it, because I would not have identified that as trauma. I would just say the woman got 5 husbands and no she got a man. But it's trauma. He was able to say, you are going through trauma. I'm here to meet you today to help you. And that's a lot of people in their lives. You go to one relationship, it isn't working, you go in another one. But it's trauma. That one fails, you go to another one. Another girlfriend disappoint you, you go to another girlfriend. Boyfriend disappoint you, you go to another boyfriend. Because you feel you want to fill that void. You feel that it will bring you into a new place. But it doesn't. It brings you back to the same old place. Just a cycle. Because you're not dealing with the trauma. But faith gives you answers. Faith gives you opportunities. And faith gives you a way out. Now look at Gideon. Gideon. Judges 6:11-15. And we know the story of Gideon. He was hiding in the wine press. He was hiding in the wine press? No, the wheat wine press, and he was shucking wheat. We know that wheat is not shucked in a wine press. So Gideon was hiding from the trauma of the Midianites. The Midianites were after them. They had terrorized them. He had won some victory. And then God said to him, go and throw down Baal, your father's idols. Oh boy, that's more trauma. Me? He said, but I'm the lowliest. I'm the smallest. I'm the weakest clan. I am the weakest. Judges 6:11-15. I'm from the weakest clan. I'm the lowliest. I can't go. So he went ahead. Now the wine press was an ancient wine press they built years ago, and it was some kind of dug into the ground. It was covered. It was a good safe space. So he ran into that and pretended to be working. Sounds like us sometimes. Where we hide in our work. He's busy in a wine press, shucking wheat. Wrong place, doing the wrong thing. But that's what we do when we engage, when we experience the impact of trauma. We tend to go to places that are not going to solve our problems, correct? That rum shop will not solve your problem. That relationship will not solve your problem. That will not deal with your trauma. But in order to get it dealt with, sometimes we hide in work because we are hiding from our traumatized situation. Or as we said before, we work enough hours, long hours. We take on 3 and 4 jobs. We never say no. We are always there. So we are hiding from our trauma. The trauma at home, the trauma with the children, the trauma with the husband, the trauma with the girlfriend, the trauma with the aunt, the trauma with the niece, the trauma in the space. Maybe it's something you can't even control. You haven't yet got a solution. So there's violence, there's abuse, there's curse, and we know the major. Listen, I want to say this. Barbados suffers from a lot of trauma, post-colonial trauma. Because we were the staple of the Caribbean, where all the slaves were brought to be bred and then distributed. Because they said they had put all the docile people here in Barbados. So all the slaves came. So we got the full Willie Lynch blueprint experimented on us. So the castrating of the slaves, the buck breaking. You know what's buck breaking? B-U-C-K, buck. You call it buck. I used to call the slaves buck. But it's the back. That's why we see a lot of homosexuality arise among our men, and we're trying to figure out why. And we say, it's just a preference. Buck breaking. Side chicks too. God gave me a revelation on side chicks. I used to be like, these young people and these side chick foolishness. And God said, Marcia, cool down. I said, what's this side chick? Where does this come from? In our day, we had friends in and visiting and so on. But it was still a level of commitment. Because obviously they took the men away from the homes, but break them, rape the women, blah, blah. Listen, and God said to me, side chicks came from the colonial masters. I never saw that. He said, what do you think used to happen in the kitchen? They had a wife, but they had the maid. They had the wife, but they had the person in charge of the maid. They had the wife, but and the wife was in the home being subjected to trauma too. Because this man had all these women on the slave plantation who were then treated as slaves. A few got a little bit of status, and that's why in the Caribbean we talk about social mobility. And big for us is social mobility, but we ain't going no further than the colonial cloud. And everybody's trying to scramble to get to social mobility. And it's just a colonial cloud. It's power over, because that's what was practiced in Barbados, in the Caribbean. And that's what we emulate. So our millennials are not doing nothing different. They just do a different version of it. It's called side chicks. So, but they're not committed to anybody. They have side chick 1. My daughter explained this to me. I almost freak out. Side chick 1 is the main chick. Then side chick 2 is the second chick. And all the chicks got to know their place. Almost I could see chickens in the yard following. So therefore, all the ducks. And my daughter explained it to me. I was shocked. Listen. So side chick 1, you take to your social events. She's the main one. You take to social events. You display her. La da 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 da. But side chick 2 and side chick 1 know that side chick 1, 2 exists. Sorry, and that side chick 1 exists. But side chick 2 know that they're not side chick 1, so don't expect to come to certain things. That's the understanding. So when you see them certain places, you don't speak. You don't, because you're side chick 2. And you know it, can't get vexed, because you know you're side chick 2. You got to wait to graduate to side chick 1. And then side chick 3, they do certain things with side chick 3 that they don't do with side chick 2 and side chick 1. I don't know if that's lower down the ladder. I don't know what things they do. But it could go down like that. And God said to me, this is part of your colonial past. It is your past of your, so when we are having education, come on, stay with me here now. When we are having education, and blacks love education, and yes, education, formal education, I was a teacher, is imperative for social, for getting out the rut of colonial power. But we now need education that's whole, that brings us into wholeness, because colonialism causes trauma. And it's being displayed in our homes, it's being displayed in our relationships, it's being displayed in our side chick. What do you call that? It's being fashioned, it's being and we don't understand that this is just colonialism being displayed and being worked out through the generations. Destroying homes, fatherlessness. You run from one family. The funny part of it is you run from one family. You don't, married or unmarried, you don't get along with this person. You get 3 children with them, 2 children with them, 4 children, whatever. And then you abandon your children and you go and get another woman or wife because you just feel like you're in love. Rather than working out the trauma, the challenges, the stress. And therefore, those children now become rejected because they're abandoned. And then you go on to another home, and then you think it's love. It's not love, it's your trauma. It's your stress. It's your colonialism. So, listen, instead of dealing with it, we try to escape it and run with it. And God is calling us today to deal with our traumas. And I know a lot of people want to hear about sin and darkness and the devil. That's all we want to talk about. This is reality, because faith is our reality and impacts our reality. So I want to say that when you see yourself acting out certain things, doing certain things in society like Barbados, understand that the things you are doing is just a new version, a lesser version of the better you. And a lesser version because it's a generational colonialist habit that has been passed down. But God is able to move us, trauma and faith, out of that trauma and into a new level of living, a new version of ourselves and a better version. So how do we move quickly? How to move towards stability? First, we rebound to God. You can put that down. We rebound to God. Now, the woman at the well did not rebound to God. She rebounded to man 5 times. And then she had another man. She got tired of husbands, then she got another man. The first lady rebounded to God. After 12 years, she said, let me go to God for my answers. So the first thing we have to do is don't be a rebounder to man, be a rebounder to God first. Then broke up with God. Mark 14:32-42 is Jesus in the Gethsemane. And Jesus suffered trauma. But when he suffered trauma in Gethsemane, he went to God. He said, and questioned, if this cup can pass from me, let it pass. Let this cup pass. So he then questioned God. He broke her with God. That's the difference. When we question, our brains don't turn off. When we broke her, then we get meaning in the trauma, out of why you're going through the trauma, or how to deal with it. So Jesus brokered with God. Let this cup be passed from me. And God said, but this is for your glory. This is for what you're going to have to dominance and dominion over. You need to pass through this. So that's the kind of conversation you want to have with God, rather than why me, God? Why this happening? Why this? Because once you're using faith, the why me, Gods, the why this is happening, why me, I deserve this, needs to go out the window. Because that's not faith, that's flesh. The brokering is where you find the purpose, which should mean sometimes you just have to sit and say, God, show me the purpose. Show me Show me. And you wait on it. So you broke up with God. Also, thirdly, don't allow yourself to be re-traumatized. And I'm not going to go into Job, but you could do Job 3:27, 29:31, and so on and so on. All of Job's friends re-traumatized him. All of them. Every one of Job's friends, with all the academic achievements, traumatized Job. And none of them were on his side. None of them soothed him then. All of them told him what he had done wrong. All of them found fault in it. All of them found something bad. And why this is happening to you? It's happening because. It's happening because. You got to do something wrong, you know. You sure you don't do something wrong? You sure? So all of that is the re-traumatizing. And they continued and continued and continued. And some of them even came in uninvited to give their opinion. Uninvited opinions re-traumatize you. So don't allow your friends, find friends that will soothe you then. Find friends in that process, in that moment, in that time, that will soothe you. Not tell you, not blame you, not say you might have sinned. You sure you're sin? You sure then you attitude because you know you? That's re-traumatizing. When you're going through trauma, you need friends who will just listen and soothe you. Sometimes it can become overwhelming, I know, trust me. But when you have even one person who can do that, that's healing. The other thing is to move through it. Understand that once you're mixing faith, you have trauma, but you're mixing your faith, God is going to teach you how to move through it and not stay in it. So 2 Corinthians 7:4 and James 1:2-4. And here's a big one. Know that God is with you even though he is silent. And that's what Job had to learn. After everybody talked and all his friends accused and all his friends criticized, then God spoke. And God said, now I'm going to tell you why you're going through this. What's the purpose? All your friends re-traumatize you, and I'm going to give you the reason. So Job 38:39. You can look all in Job, you'll find that. And the last one, I know I am long. The last one is reach out. Now, I want to plug this one in here because most of the time when we are traumatized or stressed, we don't reach out. A lot of people frighten us too by telling us to risk again. I want to, listen. A lot of us are told to risk again. That's a hard word. That's a harsh word to me. Because risk again means you're telling me to go back to where I was or where I was traumatized and open up myself again to be re-traumatized. I like the word reach out because it means that I'm being selective. It means I can be part of that healing. It means I can select people who soothe me or people who are encouragers. But risk again takes time. But I always hear people say when people are traumatized, man, you're a woman of faith, you're a man of faith, man, risk again, man. It don't happen like that. Trauma is a process. Trauma is a cycle. If you don't deal with it, and it is real and shifts your brain. So reach out. Reach out. Find someone to talk to. Find a group. But here's the other thing, and it's powerful. I remember when I was going through trauma, listen to what God did. Stay with me for one last minute. He provided a group of women. I used to meet in a restaurant. Just people come together, and we would chat and talk and drink coffee and laugh. I did that for almost 2 years. Laugh, talk. Not a group of tight friends, just a group of people. But we would meet every now and then together, and we would talk and laugh and chat and tell stories and help each other and whatever, so on and so on and so on. And God showed me that he had provided that for me. Listen, I want to say something now. When that time had come to an end, God spoke to me, and he said, now it is finished. You need to leave this group. And I didn't. And you know when I didn't leave that group, what happened? It just turned. And God said, usually you ask me what to do, And I already told you the time is done. So we also need to know that. Time to end. But once you're adding your faith and you're dealing with your trauma through your faith, God is going to give you answers. God, faith gives you answers. He's going to put you in friendships. He's going to open up opportunities to help you deal with your trauma. So you're never isolated. You're never truly rejected. You're never truly desolate, because God works for us. And that's why I think God wants you to understand it today more than anything else. Trauma will happen. It's a reality of life. It's part of the sufferings at a different level. You got the flesh, all the trauma that comes, and then the suffering for Christ, and that's part of it in a new dimension. But God is in it, and I think God wants to highlight that. God is in your trauma. He is in. If you bring him into it, he gives you answers, because faith gives you answers for trauma. But you also provide space, opportunities, and don't do it on your own. Don't do it. Ask, have that conversation, talk to God, and let him provide and open up those doors so you can be healed. So it's not just laying on of hands for trauma. You can stand. It's not just laying on of hands for trauma. It's not just deliverance for trauma, but it's having those conversations with God, brokering with God, pausing, stopping, being sensitive to some of the things, not getting yourself de-traumatized, and allowing God, reaching out and allowing God to guide you to overcome that trauma, because there are different kinds of trauma. And I don't know what you're going through, but God knows. You may stand. God knows what you're going through. And the trauma is multifaceted. Some is big, some large, some small. Just raise your hand. Talk to God for a moment. The worshipers have left. What time is it? And I'm never going to allow my husband of preaching, accuse me of preaching long again. And that's not all the sermon. Come on, just stretch in God's presence. Father, we just thank you for giving us answers in our faith to our trauma. Thank you for giving us practical answers. Thank you for causing us to view our trauma differently from the lens of faith. Thank you, God, for giving us the insight, the energy, the strength, the dynamism now to step forth and to go forth and to deal with anything that the devil brings to us, because our faith gives us answers and overcomes the power of trauma. So we give you thanks, Father, for it, and we bless your name. Come on, give him a clap.